Picture this. It's the spring of 2011. Lil Wayne is walking out of Rikers Island, 8 months done, hair pulled back, shades on, grinning like a man who just survived the impossible. Drake is weeks away from dropping what many people still call one of the greatest rap albums of the 21st century. And somewhere across town, Jay-Z and Kanye West are quietly finishing a joint project that would shake the entire industry. The game was alive. The energy was electric. And from the outside, everybody looked like they were on the same team, competing hard, sure, but ultimately moving in the same direction. What nobody could have seen, what nobody in their right mind would have predicted, is that 15 years later, the same names dominating those 2011 headlines would be caught in something so messy, so layered, so full of hidden power plays and personal grudges that it would blur the line between rap beef and actual political warfare. Jay-Z helping Lil Wayne pay off a $14 million tax debt. Kanye West calling his former collaborators the R-word on a public tweet. Drake spending a full album dissing the man he once called his greatest mentor. And Nicki Minaj screaming into the internet about blood sacrifices and satanic rituals aimed directly at Jay-Z and Roc Nation. This is not a story about who had the best verse. This is a story about power, money, pride, and the slow unraveling of a relationship that shaped an entire generation of hip-hop. And if you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now because this channel is where we connect the dots that most people don't even know exist. To understand how all of this exploded, you have to go back further than 2011. You have to go back to the root, and that root has a name. Birdman. Baby. The big bird from Cash Money Records. This is the man at the center of it all, and most people completely skip over him when they're telling the story. That is a mistake. Because without Birdman's business decisions, specifically the way he ran Cash Money Records and the way he locked down talent, none of the dominoes that fell over the next 2 decades would have ever been set up in the first place. His refusal to fairly compensate producers and artists created a culture of resentment inside Cash Money that eventually bled into every major conflict connected to that label. The beef between Drake and Pusha T? Rooted in Cash Money. The tension between Lil Wayne and Jay-Z? Cash Money. The ongoing Cold War between Roc Nation and Young Money? Still, at its core, Cash Money. One man, one label, decades of aftermath. Here is the part the casual fan often forgets. When Lil Wayne's first contract at Cash Money expired in the mid-2000s, he was not locked in. He was actually moving toward Jay-Z's Roc-A-Fella Records. Wayne was publicly saying he had signed to Jay. He was talking about being a rock boy. And Jay-Z, in one of those rare moments of genuine transparency, has confirmed that he actually called Birdman out of respect before finalizing anything, told him straight up that he was about to bring Wayne into the rock. Birdman's response? A tortious interference letter sent directly to Jay-Z's offices. Legal threats to block the signing. And just like that, Wayne stayed at Cash Money, signed a new deal, launched Young Money as a real imprint, and Birdman quietly secured 51% of all Young Money profits. Think about what that means. Every dollar Drake ever made at Young Money, every stream, every record sale, every tour cut, Birdman had his hand in it. Jay-Z understood exactly what that meant from a business perspective. And that tension, that awareness, never fully disappeared. Now here is where the story gets genuinely fascinating. Because in spite of all this background friction, the actual relationship between Jay-Z and the Young Money artists, Wayne, Drake, Nicki, was for a long time built on something real. These were not fake pleasantries. Wayne grew up worshiping Jay-Z. Drake, by his own admission, was nervous to even pull his phone out at a Jay-Z show when he was 17. Nicki Minaj watched Jay-Z from a distance as the blueprint for what a self-made empire looked like in hip-hop. And Jay, for his part, genuinely saw potential in these artists. He co-signed Wayne on the Blueprint 3. He gave Drake one of his most generous guest verses on the song Light Up from Drake's debut album, Thank Me Later. He looked at Drake like a younger version of himself, hungry, smart, calculating, and he gave him actual advice. Not polished, interview-ready advice either. Real game. He warned Drake that the people who would try to knock him off would not always be strangers. Sometimes they would come in the form of collaborators, people he had worked with, people he trusted, people who would offer him a favor while quietly working against him. That verse was prophetic in a way that even Jay probably did not fully anticipate at the time. What makes the dynamic even more layered is that on that same debut album, the same project where Jay was telling Drake to watch his back, Drake was already mapping out his next move. On the outro track of Thank Me Later, he talked about making friends with the legends he idolized, knowing full well that one day he would have to compete with them, challenge them, and potentially defeat them. He used the analogy of Allen Iverson guarding Michael Jordan. AI grew up loving Michael, but when game time came, he had to score on him. That was how Drake saw his future relationship with Jay-Z. Not as a protege staying in his lane forever, as a rival in waiting. And in 2010, that rivalry had not yet arrived, but it was already being written. The tipping point, or rather, the first visible crack, came through Watch the Throne. When Jay-Z and Kanye West announced they were doing a full collaborative album together, the Cash Money camp had reactions that ranged from competitive to quietly hostile. Drake made a joke in an interview that he did not know where Jay and Kanye got the idea for a collab project, subtly suggesting he and Wayne had thought of it first. Birdman, never one for subtlety, flat out said he was not feeling Watch the Throne when it dropped. Said it felt old. Said Wayne and Drake had more youth and hunger. And then, on the opening single from that album, the song called Ham, Jay-Z dropped bars that were aimed directly at the heart of Cash Money. He rapped about $500 million in wealth and asked if anyone in the building really wanted to compare numbers with him and his wife. He called out Baby Money. Birdman's whole nickname is Baby. The message was clear, direct, and calculated. You can compete with me on the mic if you want. But when it comes to real financial power, there is no competition. Wayne responded eventually, flipping the Baby Money line into a kidnapping threat on the Carter IV. Drake added a verse essentially apologizing for Wayne's aggression, while simultaneously co-signing every word of it. But here's the thing that sticks. Even as these shots were being fired back and forth, Drake privately admitted to being physically sick when he heard Watch the Throne's best moments. The song and as in Paris hit him in a way he was not prepared for. He said it inspired the melodic rap hook structure he would later use on Started from the Bottom. So publicly, Young Money was calling Jay and Kanye old and out of touch. Privately, Drake was studying them harder than ever. That contradiction, performing confidence while quietly feeling pressure, would define Drake's entire relationship with Jay-Z for the next 15 years. If you are still watching, smash that subscribe and like button right now because we are just getting to the part where the competition stops being about rapping and starts being about something much bigger. By 2013, the shots between Drake and Jay had settled into something more manageable. They were working together. Drake claimed a verse that Jay had originally recorded for a different project and built the Pound Cake record around it. And in describing the experience of rapping next to Jay-Z, Drake said something telling. He said he wanted to sound like a man on that track. He wanted to project strength, depth, gravitas. Not excitement. Not nerves. A man. He even played the record back multiple times in the studio just to convince himself he had held his own. That single quote reveals more about where Drake's head was at than 100 interviews could. He was not rapping next to a peer yet. He was rapping next to the standard. But then the Rolling Stone interview happened. Early 2014. Drake, speaking in what he would later claim was a misrepresented context, said Jay-Z could not drop bars without throwing in 4 art references. He said the whole rap and collect art thing was corny. The interview spread immediately. And Jay-Z, who had spent years playing the role of mentor, patron, and elder statesman in Drake's life, responded. Not with a direct diss track, but on a remix of a song Drake himself had already remixed, the We Made It Soulja Boy record. Jay rapped that he was sorry for all the art talk. Silly him, rapping about the things he actually owned, while other rappers rapped about guns they had not shot and money they had not made. Clean, precise, and dripping with the same consistent message Jay had been sending since the Baby Money era. You cannot compete with what I actually have. Drake clapped back with wordplay about never being able to hate on art since everything he does is for the art. He also dropped bars on draft day that seemed to shade Jay for being the married man, rapping about being focused on hits rather than misses, while simultaneously making a play on Jay calling him Mrs. Drizzy in a previous response. Remember when Drake said in the studio he wanted to sound like a man next to Jay? Now he was going out of his way to clarify, in bars, that he was not a Ms. The back and forth was almost playful at this point. It had not yet turned dark, but the conditions for something darker were already forming. In 2015, something happened that fundamentally changed how Drake viewed the industry and, specifically, how he viewed Jay-Z's role in his career. Meek Mill went public accusing Drake of using ghostwriters. Drake responded with diss tracks. Meek Mill responded with actual reference tracks, recordings of Drake's ghostwriter, Quentin Miller, performing verses that ended up on Drake's "If You're Reading This, It's Too Late" project. The internet exploded. The reference tracks felt like a kill shot, not because Drake lost the battle, but because their existence meant someone had deliberately leaked them to Meek Mill for maximum damage. Drake did not point the finger at Meek. He pointed it somewhere else. He said, years later, that DJ Drama had received a phone call from a quote-unquote higher-up, someone powerful enough that Drama could not say no, telling Drama to hand over those reference tracks because their guy was losing too badly. Someone needed to deliver the killing blow, and that someone had the reach to compel a major industry figure to act against his own interests. Now, who fits that description? Meek Mill had been signed to Roc Nation management since 2012, Jay-Z's company, and Drake, in the immediate aftermath of the Meek Mill battle, released the diss track Charged Up. Listen to the bars closely. He rapped about taking the high road and still having love for his idols. He referenced his Apple Music deal and used the word entitled, a direct play on the word Tidal, Jay-Z's streaming platform that Drake had backed out of just days before its public launch. He wrapped up with the line, "Rumor has it, there's something that only I know." He knew, or at least he believed he knew, and the Apple Music situation gave that belief a motive. Drake had been set to become a partial owner of Tidal, a platform that was Jay-Z's most ambitious business venture outside of music. Walking away from that deal days before launch was not just a business decision. It was a statement. And Jay-Z, who had spent years teaching Drake that ownership is everything, had just watched Drake take that lesson and use it to sign with a competing platform instead. Months later, on the 30 for 30 freestyle with Future, Drake rapped explicitly about the higher-ups coming together as a collective with conspiracies to end his run and send him a message. That is not subliminal. That is an open accusation. And the chain of logic Drake was constructing went like this. He left Tidal. Jay-Z's feelings changed. Roc Nation's artist Meek Mill went after him. Someone from the higher-up sphere connected to Roc Nation forced DJ Drama to leak the reference tracks, and when the dust settled, Jay-Z's verses and Kanye's verses were both quietly removed from Drake's Views album. Kanye even admitted this publicly at a concert, said Jay refused to appear on the record out of respect for Meek Mill, and that when Kanye tried to broker peace and get everyone on the same page, Jay pulled the conversation into territory about streaming percentages, Tidal, and industry politics. The collaboration was gone. And Drake had the clearest possible picture of who his real opposition was. What is wild is that even after all of this, after the reference track conspiracy, after the Tidal fallout, after Jay's verse getting pulled, they somehow kept working together. Jay-Z recorded a verse for Drake, while literally still recovering from performing a live show on tour. Drake shared behind-the-scenes footage. They collaborated on Love All. Drake wrote a reference track for Beyoncé's Renaissance album. At OVO Fest, Drake gave a public speech thanking Jay-Z for inspiring him simply by performing in Toronto before Drake was famous. He said watching Jay-Z bring love to his city was the moment something unlocked inside him. This is 2022. 2 years after Drake was accusing higher-ups of conspiring against him. 2 years after all the Tidal bitterness. Standing on a stage in front of his city, thanking the man he had also been quietly building a case against for years. That is the contradiction that sits at the center of this entire story. The love was real, the competition was real, and the conflict was real. All three things coexisted for over a decade without ever fully resolving. The turning point, the moment the Cold War stopped being cold, came in waves. First, it was Kendrick Lamar and Drake's eruption in 2024. The battle was historic. The destruction was thorough. And Jay-Z, whose Roc Nation company had signed Kendrick's management, watched the whole thing from the sidelines. Not just watched, was present at Kendrick's victory lap events, was visible, was associated. And when the NFL announced Kendrick as the Super Bowl halftime performer, a decision made in collaboration with Roc Nation, which Jay-Z had partnered with the NFL back in 2020, the entire Young Money camp lost it. Lil Wayne, who had been publicly expressing hope about performing at a Super Bowl set in his home city of New Orleans, felt robbed. Nicki Minaj erupted into a weeks-long series of social media posts that went from pointed critiques to full-on conspiracy allegations, claims about rituals, blood sacrifices, satanic practices, all aimed directly at Jay-Z and Roc Nation. Cameron made it plain on camera, said there is one person stopping Lil Wayne from getting the opportunities he deserves, and everybody knows exactly who that person is. Here is where Drake entered a new phase entirely. The Iceman album was not just a collection of songs. It was a mission statement, a declaration that he was done playing the role of the respectful apprentice, done acknowledging the hierarchy, done treating Jay-Z's opinion or approval as something worth seeking. He rapped about other rappers running to Jay-Z for a second opinion like he is some all-knowing oracle, and said his guys do not do that. He rapped about taking $500,000 to dinner and never being able to learn anything from anyone in that camp. That line is a direct callback to the famous hypothetical, would you rather have $500,000 or dinner with Jay-Z, because the knowledge from that dinner could make you far more. Drake's answer was simple. He cannot teach me anything. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. He referenced island hopping and redacted names tied to the Epstein controversy, associating Jay-Z with the darkest possible cloud. He threw up the rock symbol on camera and followed it immediately with the middle finger. The message was not even dressed up in metaphor anymore. It was direct, personal, almost desperate in its intensity. And then came the line on his biggest track from the album, referencing Jay-Z's nickname and his label in the same breath, saying the jig is up. We know how you're rocking already. It was confrontational in a way that practically demanded a response. And Jay-Z gave it one. Less than a month after Iceman dropped, Jay surfaced at the Roots picnic and delivered a freestyle that addressed not just Drake, but the entire extended camp, Nicki Minaj, Jaguar Wright, and others who had been firing at him publicly. He rapped about publishing, about contracts written in perpetuity, about workers versus bosses, about knowing the difference between a chart champion and someone who actually moves the culture. He was sharp, composed, and, in sharp contrast to how Drake and Nicki had been coming at him, completely unrattled. That composure might have been the most devastating part of the whole response. Drake was out here releasing albums about Jay-Z. Jay-Z responded with a freestyle at a music festival and then went back to living his life. The deeper you look at this conflict, the more you realize that both sides have been remarkably consistent in what they actually believe. Jay-Z's position has never really changed. From the baby money era to the art bars dispute to the Tidal situation to the perpetuity contract lines, his argument is always the same. Ownership matters. Real wealth is not what you rap about. It is what you legally control. And until you own your masters, your distribution, your platform, your equity, you're still working for someone else's dream, no matter how many #1 albums you have. That message has been aimed at Drake specifically, but has also been aimed at the entire generation of artists who came up during the streaming era and signed deals that extracted their leverage before they were old enough to know what leverage meant. Drake's position has also been consistent, just in the opposite direction. He has spent 15 years gradually peeling away the deference he once showed toward Jay-Z, replacing admiration with something closer to resentment dressed up as confidence. The progression is visible in real time if you lay the quotes side by side. In 2009, he rapped about shedding a tear for everything Jay-Z taught him. In 2013, he called Jay-Z the strongest relationship he had in hip-hop and the best mentor in the game. In 2017, he rapped that he did not listen to Jay-Z's advice on an old song. In 2022, he held a money phone to his ear and directly mocked a Jay-Z verse about financial maturity. In 2026, he rapped that he could never learn anything from Jay's camp and compared the relationship to one tier, singular. One thing, maybe if even that. The arc is not subtle. It is a man slowly convincing himself that he outgrew the teacher. Whether that is true is a different question entirely. What makes the current moment so remarkable is how far outside of music this conflict has stretched. You have Tory Lanez's father cursing out Jay-Z and Roc Nation outside a courthouse after his son's sentencing. You have Megan Thee Stallion, a Roc Nation artist, being publicly dissed by Drake on a major commercial release. You have Drake refusing to provide music for a DJ Khaled project, a longtime collaborator, with people speculating it is because Khaled is Roc Nation affiliated. You have Nicki Minaj going from one of the most celebrated women in hip-hop history to spending years on Twitter, making allegations that most people can barely follow and almost nobody can verify. You have the entire landscape of 2026 hip-hop divided in a way that is not really about music anymore. It is about who you align with, who you stand behind, and which version of events you believe. Jay-Z, for his part, has tried to frame all of this in terms of growth and culture. He said in a recent interview that he is not sure rap battles are healthy for the culture anymore, that in the social media era, what starts as competition between artists becomes a war between fan armies that drags in children, family members, and people who have nothing to do with the actual conflict. He said he loves the music that gets created in those moments, but hates where the fallout lands. Some people heard that and thought he was coping, trying to spin a loss. But there is another way to read it. Jay-Z has been in this industry for 30 years. He has watched battles and careers and friendships and lives. He has seen what happens when competition goes past the point of no return. And maybe, just maybe, he genuinely does not want that for Drake even now. Even after everything. Because here is the truth that nobody in this conversation wants to say out loud. Drake broke Jay-Z's record for most #1 albums on the Billboard charts by a rapper. 15 versus 14. Whatever you think of how those records were achieved, whatever you think of ghostwriting or industry machinery or the streaming era inflating numbers, that record stood. And Jay-Z knew it was coming long before it happened. He has always known Drake's commercial ceiling was going to be historic. That is not the problem. The problem, as Jay has stated in different forms over and over again, is that commercial success without structural ownership is a kind of golden cage. You can have every record, every streaming milestone, every magazine cover, and still be a worker inside someone else's system. Lil Wayne himself is a living example. Hundreds of millions in streams, decades of cultural dominance. And he needed Jay-Z's help to pay off a $14 million tax bill in 2025. The question that hangs over all of this, and the one this video cannot fully answer, is where it goes from here. Jay opened Pandora's box with that Roots Picnic freestyle. He said 2026 is offense year. Drake has never been the type to absorb a hit and stay quiet. Nicki Minaj has already proven she will say absolutely anything regardless of consequences. And somewhere in the middle of all this, there are artists J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, dozens of others who are watching this play out and making decisions about which side of history they want to be on. The fascinating thing about this Cold War is not the beef itself. Rap has always had beef. What makes this different is the institutional dimension of it. This is not just two rappers disagreeing about who is better. This is a conflict between two different philosophies about what power in the music industry looks like. Jay-Z's philosophy: build infrastructure, own your equity, become the system. Drake's philosophy: dominate the system from within it and rewrite the rules on the way up. Neither philosophy is wrong, but they are incompatible at the top. Two people cannot occupy the same space with the same crown. And that is what this has always been about, not the art references, not the Grammy losses, not the baby money bars. It has always been about who gets to define what the pinnacle of hip-hop success actually means. Jay-Z built his definition over 30 years of ownership, investment, and strategic positioning. Drake built his definition over 15 years of commercial dominance, cultural ubiquity, and emotional connection with a global audience. Both definitions are defensible, but only one of them can be right. And the most devastating irony of all is that Jay-Z was the one who tried to show Drake the way to his version of success. He gave him the verse on Light Up. He wrote him the letter after Take Care. He offered him equity in Tidal. He tried to pass the torch in the only way Jay-Z knows how, by offering ownership. And Drake took the lesson, walked across the street, and handed it to Apple Music for a check. Jay-Z has never forgiven that. Not because the money hurt him, but because it confirmed, in the clearest possible way, that everything he tried to teach was rejected. You can lead a man to ownership and still watch him choose a paycheck. That is the Cold War in a single sentence. Before you go, think about this. In 2011, you had four of the most powerful forces in rap: Jay-Z, Kanye, Drake, Wayne, all moving in the same orbit, all reaching for the same sky. Today, Kanye has called them all children in public. Wayne needed financial rescue from the man he once challenged. Drake is building monuments to his own defiance while quietly watching his cultural influence erode. And Jay-Z is standing at a festival microphone, unbothered, responding to an entire album of disses with a freestyle and a raised eyebrow. Whatever you think about who won and who lost, one thing is undeniable. The game always reveals what people are actually made of. Not in the moments of triumph, in the moments of pressure. And pressure, in hip-hop, has no expiration date. This story is not over. Not even close. If this breakdown hit different for you, if you finally see the full picture for the first time, then subscribe right now. Because the next chapter of the story is already being written, and you do not want to be the last one to understand it.